Welcome. This is the podcast from the Covenant Nation Manchester, and the in a nutshell podcast from the Covenant Nation Manchester. And today, we're going to be talking about next generation parenting, involved and informed parenting, traversing geography and chronology. My name is Ladi, and with me to do justice to this topic today is
Amanda.
Amanda. Welcome. So, really, we'll just jump straight into it. The very first thing I'd really like us to look at is the fact that parenting is a learning journey for us as well. My journey in parenting certainly has been the medium through which God has grown me. You find that with each phase, you too, you're going through character development. It's important because I feel as though people feel under pressure to present themselves as perfect parents. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. We're all learning.
Absolutely.
And it's important to be open when you have challenges and to be quick to ask, raise your hand and say, help, I'm drowning here. But of course, when you're going to ask for help, you need to be asking for help from people who you can trust. You've seen, their own children or their own work with children. You can trust that they're going to be giving you counsel, both from a godly point of view, but apart from being godly, because they are,
Practical things.
practical things, and also people have different views. We're all godly, yes, in Christendom, but my style may not necessarily be your style. You do have to find people who are aligned with your way of thinking. What do you think, Sister
Absolutely.
Amanda?
You hit the nail on the head. I've found myself telling my teenage daughter that, look, I've never been a parent before. Before you, I wasn't a parent. So I'm learning this thing as well. So even though I'm the figure to give direction and everything, but you know, I'm doing the best I can. We're learning it together.
Together.
And even the kids have their own parts to play in helping a good parent who is trying to be good. But yeah, it's a learning process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's even more of a learning because even each child is different. So you can't even say I'm now an expert because of my first child. And then the second one is different and then the third one is different.
True.
I saw a joke where somebody wrote parenting just like a joke, a scam. He said because it takes you so many years to get used to the first one, and when you finally find you figured it out, the next one comes and it's totally different. So you have to learn again. So
Yeah,
absolutely, it's a
yeah,
learning
yeah,
process.
it's true. um it also differs as they grow.
Yes.
Different phases. There are some challenges you face. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? I sat down and said, this is God trying to teach me
Yeah.
a new thing.
Yeah.
So we do have to be conscious as we're raising the children that we ourselves are being raised by
Yes.
God and learning the lessons and making the changes necessary.
Absolutely.
Talking about asking for help, especially for those of us who are immigrants and have moved here, a lot of people struggle with a lack of knowledge. There's help available, but there's a lack of knowledge about who to go to or where to go, whether from government or around you. And there is help available. Of course, first of all, from your community, ask for help, as we've said before. But there are other things, many amenities, many programs made available at local level, but also nationally. Stamina was talking about, what was it, daycare allowance.
Yes, so this is important for immigrants. Or well, for every the government has a number of hours um, allowance free for nursery education, and that is usually from 3 to 4 year olds. Some 2 year olds, I think, selected criteria. There are some criteria they use for that. It's 15 hours or 30 hours. Now, the 15 hours would apply to those immigrants who are still on a visa,
Okay.
where the visa says no recourse to public funds. The thing I've found out is that people won't tell you. Many people don't even know these rules. And in the UK, it's your responsibility to know what applies to you. So you could go to school and they're happy to give you 40 hours, 30 hours, but you have to be the one. Some may not check, they may just assume you are eligible for it. But if you there's no recourse to for public funds, then 15 hours is the one for everybody, irrespective of immigration status. So
Okay.
that is it. And then for those who have settled here, I think who have their indefinite leave to remain, or they have their, passports and all of that, they can have 30 hours free. So anything on top of those 15 or 30 hours, you pay, because
Ah.
it's more expensive than what you're used to coming, per hour. You have to pay also. If you had to pay all of it, is a lot, which is why private nurseries are a bit expensive, but
Okay. The other thing that I know that parents sometimes struggle with,
mm,
especially when you're just coming, is the children just even adjusting,
yes,
right? It's amazing how we overlook, with the adults, we start the change management from when we make up our minds that
yes,
we are moving, right? But the
yes,
children, you imagine just waking up one day and being pulled away from everything you know,
yes,
and you come here and they bung you,
yes,
into a new school. Some children have challenges adjusting.
yeah.
And I just wondered, aside from the parents at home, you know, being sensitive and conscious, and really trying to help the children adjusting, are there any other types of resources to help maybe children struggling with integrating, or children who are having maybe mental health challenges?
So I think that for the issue of integrating, um, that is that is an issue that would possibly be sorted out. It's a difficult issue, I have to say. I remember feeling guilty when my kids came, and that's when it dawned on me that we made the decision as parents, and these children had no choice, and they had difficulties making friends. I remember the first play dates my daughter was invited to. I almost somersaulted in the kitchen. I was so excited, and because it meant so much to me, because she was feeling left out. So these are real issues, but there are things that, as parents, like you said, there's a parents part of it, and I think it's just having a community for that one. But then there are children who may now struggle with certain things. And the pattern that I see is that maybe you bring the child younger, okay? And then the child begins to develop more. And then you find out that this child isn't developing as he should. So there wasn't a problem initially, or you didn't think there was. But now there seems to be a problem. He's not writing, he's not speaking, he's not, you begin to wonder, is it the change of environment?
Yeah.
Or is there a developmental problem?
Issue, yes.
So that kind of thing, obviously the parents would observe for a bit. But if you the parent has that gut feeling that, look, something is not quite right, there are channels to go to. You speak with the school. Um so usually what happens, there's an interplay between the school, maybe the child's GP, and then child support services, and there are different types of them. So it might be the child, it might be, they said that the gov.uk has a lot of advice on anything living in the UK.
Yeah.
So it does say there that if you feel that your child needs support, speak to the school. They will get an assessment, or you can even apply directly through your local council, okay, for the child to get an assessment. They might now, if the child is dealing with things like dyslexia, dealing with ADHD, dealing with autistic spectrum disorder, whatever, they might now do an assessment. If they now do an assessment, they now determine what kind of help the child needs. But I would suggest that there be keen observation. Okay, keen observation. If you feel that, maybe, because I will give an example. When my son came, he was 3, my youngest, and he could write 1 to 10. Do you understand? I
Mm.
think they used to teach them a bit too advanced in
Yes,
Nigeria, to be
Nigeria,
honest. But
from age 2.
the assignments were really weird,
That
really
really
very
weird.
high level. What's the name? But he could write 1 to 10. When he came here for another 2, 3 years, they didn't write. They were just going to play. I was so distressed about it. Do you understand?
Yes.
But then when they started again, he picked up. So there could be that lag, and you'd be wondering, is something wrong? It may just be that they haven't started concentrating on that. But then you now put the child to test. If you still feel that there are problems, flag it up. The reason why I say is you don't want to flag it up too early for them to just unnecessarily label your child.
Mm.
But then at the same time, if you really feel there's a problem, flag it up. They're what you call special education needs and disability officials send, or and then you have a coordinator, senku. Each school is supposed to have one.
Mhm.
So if there is a concern that there's a child struggling, then they would assess the child. There are other steps they will go through, do an education healthcare plan, EHCP if required, and that will now guide whether that child, what kind of support the child needs. Does he need one-on-one in school? Does he need to be sent to a special school or stuff like that? So it's a bit of a journey, but
Journey,
it
yeah.
starts with first observing, trying to change, things, and see whether the child still doesn't respond as well. Even behavioral problems, they can be flagged up and the person can receive help. I have tried to find out, because there are monies that are also given to help with care of children with problems. I think I have found out that non-visa holders may be entitled to some of them, except maybe specific ones like disability living allowance. But they might be able to get actually help with things, because it's a full-on job if there's a child that has a social or mental health problem or developmental problem.
Again, and .gov is .gov is a
It
wonderful
blows my
place.
mind every time. I keep saying, why didn't I know to check here for this? Yeah.
.gov is a wonderful place.
Yes.
But as you were talking, it came to my mind that what about the parents?
Yeah.
Where do they go to get help? And I just think to myself, because I see all sorts of stories about, parents and involvement with authorities.
Yeah.
And I imagine that by the time I came, my children were older. My
Yeah.
children are older. But I imagine that if I had younger children and they had issues, or I had issues, I would be a bit reluctant to go to the authorities, because I keep hearing this nightmare scenario of children being taken away,
Yeah.
from parents over stuff that is normal where we
you
come from.
Yes.
And so I just wondered, I guess it's a twofold, and you're more in that field. So I will ask the twofold question I have is, one, if one was really, really under pressure, like in Lagos, I was a single parent, even in Lagos, but if it got too much, I could take my children and go and keep in my auntie's house and go and hang out with another friend who has gone through the experience, who will support me.
Yeah.
And people would cook and bring to the house.
Yeah.
We don't have that here.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways? I know we say church, but everybody is busy
Yes,
also
that's the
with
thing.
their lives.
Yeah.
Where do we get help?
Hmm.
What kind of help?
That's a very good question. Well, firstly, we have at least mentioned community in the form of church or whatever it is. I think one of the things that we tried to do when we came, it didn't always work, because sometimes if you've lived here too long, you don't think like a Nigerian anymore. You know what I mean? Or an African, or wherever you came from. Okay, even if it's Sri Lanka or whatever it is. So if you see another person who looks like you and you smile at them, and you expect them to be friendly back, some may not, but it still works a number of times. Actively build a community around you. Okay, like in my area, even apart from church, we have people who can understand our challenges, that you could say, oh, could you please help me pick up my child? I'm running late, or stuff like that. You kind of like have a little backbone. Obviously, you can't fully distress in such scenarios, but they still help you out with certain difficult circumstances. So long and short, try and make friends. It's not just helping to pick up children or anything. Try and make friends. Make friends with where you this is our home now for the period we're here. So make friends with the people here, but also make friends with people who came from the same place you did as well. It just gives you a wider reach of support, where someone who's naturally here may not understand you dropping in to collect something. I remember I had an African neighbor, and she just knocked on my door and said she didn't have salt. And she said, what a blessing to have a neighbor that I can ask salt from, because obviously she couldn't do it. It probably would not be understood, but it's not that strange to us, that kind of thing. But that can also just give you a level of peace and calmness. The other way is, in the end, you have to look within. and look to God. But then when you have some other specific issues, there are charities that support families. So I was able to check up some of them. There's some specific charities, and this there was one. They help with parenting. So I think the link was on gov.uk. They can give classes on parenting. I personally have attended a teens parenting class from a church, and it was mind-blowingly helpful. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't just the education of it. It was when I was struggling with some things and wondering, am I even on point? You understand? What am I even doing? Is it making any impact? I was really at a low point. And I heard of the class and I attended. The first class was as if God just gave me a hug. Honestly, it was nobody hugged me. Oh. In the class, first and foremost, I felt so validated. I could see a lot of the issues that I thought were peculiar to me.
To you.
And they were just part of what teens do and what every parent was sharing. And I was like, what? So, first and foremost, it was such a detox for me, and then learning so many other things about parenting. And then if one of the struggles we have is parenting, I think that the African parent also has to have a change of mind.
Yes.
We have
I say
to.
that. Yes.
That we can. There's a lot to
Our
unpack there,
parenting style.
but we
my
have to
God.
learn.
Mm.
Even myself, that I thought I was a bit, I've had to still step down. You have to step down. It's a different age. It's a different time. So the methods are different. And to be fair, a lot of what we applaud that we experienced, we're not all good. The very tough way of dealing. And if you do that and you get a lot of resistance back, because the children of these days are not like how we would just keep quiet, that can stress you as a parent. So all of those things, a little here, a little there can help in.
But let's talk a bit more about authorities.
Yeah.
Right? How do we deal with authorities? On my own part,
Yeah.
the extent to which I have dealt with authorities when it comes to my children has been school.
Yeah.
Right? The one thing I made up my mind to do was that I was going to be my child's
involved.
advocate, in school. So I was really heavily involved, knew their curriculum, went for every meeting, spoke to every teacher, encouraged my child to step up and take leadership roles, in school, and pushed her. So I found that because we went to, we came late in the season, so we got some school that wasn't one of the top rated schools. The thing, even the children didn't expect that much of themselves, right? You have children here who don't have, they want to graduate, and in fact, that's the ones who want to go to school. The expectations are always different. So I found myself pushing my child where I wouldn't have done it in Lagos, because I know in Lagos everybody is competing. And my role in Lagos was to, don't worry, even if you don't pass, you're still my child. I'm still proud of you. I became opposite here, because here, frankly, the child can just faff and waste time, right? But I wanted to be a part of, what was going on. And I think it's amazing how a lot of other children didn't have their parents, were always taking shifts, right? So didn't have their parents showing up as frequently as they should. And it's amazing how, even from a prevention point of view, right, if they know that this is an involved parent, a vocal parent, they're a bit more careful, in my opinion, about how they handle the child.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, what has your experience been? What kind of tips, in addition to that, do we give people? So because there's a lot of fear around, let them not take my child.
So what you have said, I think you've really done brilliantly, and that is how we should be as parents. I think that first, one of the misconceptions we have is that coming from where we come from, everything here is better. So you can just relax and let your child just almost rot in an educational system here that doesn't demand more of what the child is willing to give. So if the child does well, they'll just put them in one category. They are sets. They have sets in class. They have sets for math, sets for, And then if the child is in a lower set, they won't necessarily push the child. They will just say, oh, the child is performing at his level and he's absolutely fine. If you hear the words on parents' evening, and I keep asking, is there any place of improvement? Like, no, she's absolutely fine. I heard somebody actually told me this. that her colleague at work, his son is a teacher, and the head teacher in his school said, look, these children have Nigerian parents. So if they come for parents, we just say everything is fine. Because they know that we want to find out. And of course, some Nigerian parents may be cross, which is where you don't want that to happen and cross with the child. You're supposed to give the child support, but yet we're supposed to motivate the child. So yes, being involved is very, very important. Knowing what's going on with the child and understanding the educational system. I find that they give information. So read. They send loads of emails. I can tell you that has been one of my trials in life because my kids now go to 3 different schools. So I have a barrage of emails, but keep in touch with what they are saying. They send you the curriculum, read it. Do you understand? If you don't understand anything, ask the teachers. You understand? Find out from the students what they are learning, what they are doing. Find out what set is she in. Okay, how can she, when
Get
my
better.
daughter moved, my older daughter moved to the first secondary school she went to. She was in the set below the higher set, I think in maths. I kept asking, so what does she need to do? They were like, nothing. No, you can't say that. You understand? Let's try and motivate the child. So me and her had a plan, and she had a plan to move up, and in fact, she even changed school eventually because she said the school wasn't motivating enough. But these are, it's important to be involved. It's also important to know what the rules are because the truth of the matter is that every parent is trying to do their best most. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm.
The fear is our style of parenting can be flagged up as signs of child abuse
Abuse.
and all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that is why I said we ourselves have to even retrain ourselves. Do you understand? Because I think in not just in this society, in the world today, corporal punishment, spanking a child, beating a child or injuring a child is something that it should not be. Do you get what I mean? And a lot of times when we think back to how things were when we were growing up, I was blessed to have a mom who didn't really do that. But generally, it came out of anger. And then the adult is lashing out at the child. And then in the end, it's more injurious than helpful. So we ourselves have to retrain our minds to be able to train up our children without touching them.
Mm.
You understand? Because then that might be a problem. But even in touching, you understand there are rules, like spanking is what it's called. You understand? Is it spanking, smacking? You can
Spanking.
actually smack your child. You understand? Your child is doing something, you smack the child. But there are specific rules. Do you understand? If there is any wound or injury, you understand, any mark, they have different categories of it. There's serious bodily harm, there's the average one or whatever. I have it written somewhere.
Yeah.
If you don't want that to happen, because that's beginning to show that it's more injurious and punitive than corrective. You understand?
Mm.
I think in Scotland it was banned in 2020. I think in Wales 2022 or something like that. In England, you can still, so if a child says, "Oh, my mom smacked me," and the authorities call you, you can, as long as you know that you yourself you have cleared with yourself that you're not doing anything injurious, you can say, "Oh yes, she was naughty and I spanked her and I warned her about it." But you know what? And they may decide to investigate, but as long as there are no signs of hurt, you understand, to your child. Because the thing we have to remember is, even though we don't want the authorities to chase you, to chase us, we have to remember that we shouldn't do any harm as well. You understand? The child is your priority. You're caring for the mental and physical well-being of that child. So as long as you're not doing um anything that you be scared that you need to hide for, then you should be able to speak. I know somebody who was called and she knew the rules and she said, "Oh yes, I actually spanked her. That is allowed, isn't it?" And then they were like, "Oh well, yeah, we just wanted to be sure nothing was wrong." They'll ask the child questions, and if nothing wrong. So what I would just say is, we really need to try to make our home a bit of a haven for the children, to be honest.
Yes.
Even though we want to correct them and train them in the way we grew up, but we need to also learn to do it in such a way that there's still peace and harmony at home, and the children are able to separate that. Okay, I know mommy's strict side, but I know she also loves me. I know that when daddy says do this, but I know that daddy's not going to hurt me or harm me.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah. Still talking about interacting with, well, schools, authorities. The other thing I observed when we came
Yeah.
was that, a lot of the time, the children here in this culture tend to leave home a little earlier.
Yeah.
So what happens is that your child begins to get exposed. It's as if the institutions start to drive that you can do without parents, you can manage your own, much, much, much earlier than we would even begin to have the
Nice.
conversation back home.
Yeah.
At some point, I started to feel like they were driving a wedge, especially with my son. I started to feel like some of the things they were encouraging were driving a wedge between me and my child. Up until when they leave secondary school, they will call you, they will tell you, but the minute they get to high school, they start telling you, no, they can't tell you stuff if the child should tell you first, that kind of thing. I struggled with it. I struggle with it. And I think that is something that we should note, that we have to bend over backwards to keep family cohesion, to keep the child still connected, to help the children understand that you're not going anywhere. You're not carrying bag and leaving home at 18 to go and live in a flat. That's not how we do, things. What have you found?
So that is true. To be honest, the level of independence comes much earlier than that. Even things like I remember when I first came there's a doctor's training they do if you're a new doctor in the UK. And one of the examples they would give you would be things like a 12-year-old going to the GP to seek for contraception. And they're like, what's your answer? Of course, it's a training for foreign doctors. So you have Asians, Africans also. So obviously everybody's answer is, of course not, go for the parents, so and so. And they'd say no, that if you assess that the child has capacity, the child understands what she's requesting for, then you should be able to give that child.
At 12.
Yes, that was the exact age example they gave. She was able to give that child without speaking to the parents. And this was less than the age of like 16 or
16.
18 that you'd say, and of course that was quite stunning and shocking to us. But yes, that is there. The only way to go about it, because these are legal, they are established means, and that is how everyone's grown up here and they're used to it. Like we were chatting, I was saying that I had some savings for my kids, and when my oldest turned 16, I didn't find it on my dashboard anymore. And I called them and I was like, I cannot find money that's, thinking that they would apologize. They just said, excuse me, how old is she, ma'am? And I was like, she's 16. They're like, I have no access to it anymore.
Money that you put there for the child.
I had heard about it, but when it happened to me, it was
It's crazy.
So, and then, you can imagine giving a child access to that. If that, they've already said that she has the right to control it. She can just go and buy and say, I want to buy an iPhone 7.
I'm telling you, my son in
Whereas
school, they were telling
you
them 16.
Yeah.
You can get money from here. This is how to apply for that. I was like, what?
I think there is a positive side to it, because I think that it takes a much longer time to stand on your own 2 feet where we come from, which is not good in itself. So it has its merits, but like you said, it's almost as if it's sold hand in hand with you,
separate from your parents.
Yes. So the only way is what you said, is when you have a relationship with the child before you get to that time. Otherwise, it's just in the hands of, you're just trusting God for how it turns out, because children will just some children will turn their backs and go. So it is having a relationship with the child. And that is why, interestingly, that's one thing that, even though we may have some parenting styles that raise up children a bit stricter and stuff, but I also think that the way we grew up, parents were not as hands-on. And I will explain. We were very hands-on, but like, in the end, you had lots of domestic help. You had friends, family who will pitch in. You'll go to work, come back, be in traffic. The dad won't even, But here, you have to take the child to swimming. You have to take the child to this. You take to the park. You understand? So in a way, there's also the avenue to develop
that bond.
A bond, so do it. Don't begrudge going out. And me, that I'm saying it, I have a really busy job, and many times my son wants to go to the park, which is beside our house, and I still say, please, I can't go now. But you understand, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm just saying that mindset is there, that this time is what you have to build that bond. So sometimes, even though there are times I say I can't go, there are times when I've just come back from an on-call, I'm tired. Everybody can say, I will carry myself and go, because it gets to a point where it's only those love strings that you can pull
on. My goodness, it was, and half of the time, you won't even know the extent of the things they are telling them. It's only in the course of talking to the children. Oh, they told me I can get this and I can get that. In fact, I found myself by the time my son was finishing high school and going into uni,
Oh.
sis, I found myself, you know how you be cooking special dish and
Oh.
just you're practically wooing, you are,
Child, just to hear
just
anything
to
about
hear
what's
stuff
happening
and
with
to
him,
keep
the bond.
keep the child connected. It was a bit of a shock, for me. Then the other thing I'd like to do, so is the I did woo. I did. We were always friends from beginning,
Okay.
but I also made the point of, please, that's not how we do it here.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, you're not an adult till you're 21. Even at that 21, I lived with my parents. They'll be like, well, that's you. I'm
Yeah, till
like,
you married or something, until you had to leave the house.
that's so, no, that's not how we do things here.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay here. And I even began to learn how to do math. See, it's compounding interest. If you start paying, rent at this age, instead put it in,
Oh.
this, you actually, it was a whole lot of
Oh,
strategy.
I
Oh.
can imagine.
My son still left, but at least I was able to delay it until he was in like second year uni. He had
Okay.
turned 19, but even at that, it'll be, I've made your favorites to come. Then he
Oh.
will now come for the weekend. I know my daughter isn't going anywhere, but with boys in particular, I think
Yeah.
that's a bit of an issue. But then let's talk about boundaries. That's something else. Again, look, I'm Nigerian. I came to this country at over 40. I'm never, going to
Yeah.
be not Nigerian. My mind can open and all that.
Yeah.
But my identity is already
course,
formed.
yes.
And I tell my children, yes, you're British. You've moved to England. Eventually you become British, but you are Nigerian first. And then we're Christian.
Yes.
There are things that may be acceptable, for other
yeah.
people, but it's not acceptable,
Yeah.
here. I was quite firm with boundaries. Having said that, one particular boundary that I didn't enforce that I regret now is that I feel that I let my son start going to work
Early.
too early. If it was a school arranged thing, at least they are being supervised. But the minute they go out into the world, even if it is for 4 hours a week, they are exposed to influences that are not even in the educational system. Nobody's thinking about safeguarding the real adult influences, and they begin to, expose them to stuff that is enticing, especially for a teenager. If I would do it all over again, that boy won't go to work until he graduates, right? There are other children. After all, the person who
Yeah.
even gave the referral for that job that he took on, it was a holiday job to start with, was another child in church, the church I was going to at that time, who had been doing that work and seemed okay. That young man went on to Oxford, which is why I felt comfortable, but it just didn't go that well. So you have two things. Your child, you have to know the kind
Your
of child
That is it.
that you have,
Yeah.
and then just be really firm with those boundaries. I find that there are so many other things, almost as if they target the children, target the young, that's the ones going into the teens. Everybody's trying to recruit children for different things. So you have to be conscious with the boundaries. That going to work. Sleepover, my children know that we in my house, so from Nigeria, we don't do sleepover. I always insist, bring the I want to know your friends. They can come and sleep. But what happens is that if they come and spend first night, the second time, very soon, those other people will want reciprocity, and
Obviously.
I'm not going to reciprocate.
Yeah.
It was a sore point with my kids, but I didn't apologize because something happened. Sorry, they will tell you,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that kind of thing. What other sorts of boundaries should we be conscious of?
So, I think one thing, if we're going to look at it from the angle of Christian parents and from where we come from, the reason why we keep talking about where we come from is because we can see real merits in
Some.
some of how we were brought up, and we can see the demerits. So, like I used to tell my kids, we've come here, there's so many good things here, and then there are also not so good things, same as where we're coming from. So we'll just embrace the good from both areas, right? So one thing is, speaking as, let's say, from the Christian angle now, this is something I realized when I was much younger. But I've also found out that if I'm not careful, as in it can play out in my life. How do I put, I've caught myself seeing it play out and then, trying to catch up with that. The fact that you're a Christian doesn't mean that it diffuses to your children.
Yeah.
If you do not say certain things and show them in the word of God, okay? So I feel that we have said some basic things, but sometimes when you're just giving a Bible story that has shaped what you do, you just say, hey, remember when Esther did this, and you find out that they don't know. You don't know. But I knew this by, this age. So you're like, look, there's a lot to teach. You understand? Because it's what you know. A lot of how we are is what we learned. Either just even before you became born, you just going to Sunday school and hearing it. Do you understand? Or even if you were Catholic and you were cramming some verses, there are just some things that were already in you. So it's teaching them, and especially going head on with the issues of today. In this age, just show them what the word of God says. That's the best you can do, right? Show them so they themselves begin to have boundaries in their own minds when they go out. You understand? Then two is, I think, really being watchful about the friends that the children make. It's not always easy. Like you said, there's already a level of independence when they grow up. You understand? And one of the issues that I used to have is that when they go to school, it's not like they can even count people, how many people are even, of like minds. Let's put it that way. So they are forced to make friends.
Yes.
Then you also be dealing with, oh, my kids don't have friends, and then you now hear they have friends, and then you're happy about it
because you want them to integrate.
Yes, I would give you the first secondary school my daughter was in. She didn't have many friends, but she had two friends who loved her like anything, but they had beliefs that I did not agree with. In fact, one of them was already identifying as something. Do you get what I mean? And you're like, this is I taught my child, I taught her very expressly that everyone has a right to do what they want to do.
Yes.
So we're not going to argue with
We're not
that.
judging,
You understand? But this is our faith. So, it's not what we and anyway, we ended up changing, not for that reason, interestingly. But I'm just trying to say, look at that dilemma. She didn't have friends, and then the two friends she had were totally anti what we believe in as, Christians. So it can be an issue. So the best thing is to pray. So I even used to pray that, God, any friendship that is not for them, just
Predators.
yes, exactly.
Predators.
Anything that is not right. Then two, even at least just know who they are, know about them. It might even make the kids a bit more careful as they are younger in making these friends. You understand? Then another thing is, you talked about sleepovers. I think that as parents, we do boundaries. Not that sleepovers are bad. My own reason for not doing sleepover is because I don't know the spiritual atmosphere of the place. I also, apart from the possibility of molestation,
abuse,
exactly, especially having two daughters, you understand. I remember I told you a story where I went to an Airbnb, and I came downstairs in the middle of the night, and the owners, I just heard some humming, in fact it was like humming, groaning, some funny sounds that did not sound like prayer, like our prayer. You get what I mean? And then when they saw me, they just jolted. They were in the living room at that time, and they looked at me with such hostility. People who had been so nice before, and then they were just hovering around me in the kitchen as I said, oh, I just came to make a cup of tea. And that just shows me that whatever spiritual worries you have back in Africa, back here, they are here.
Yeah.
They are here. They have nicer names.
Yes.
They have tarot card. Everything is tush. Everything is nice. Even if you go to the aisle, I was in B&M. I was seeing Uja. I was seeing tarot on the toy aisle.
They
do you
don't
understand?
do it as party game.
Look at that. So you see all of these things. So it's not that it's not there. It's not that someone may not approach your child and say, I'm going to recruit you or anything, but the atmosphere is there. There are spirits there. You don't know. And everything will look nice. And your child's going to spend the night there because I do not know. I told my children clearly, there may be no harm in you going. But because I am not sure, I will not let you go. I've told them specifically, there are some people, because I know their spiritual persuasion and I know the setting, I could possibly allow you. But since those ones have not called for sleepover, then sorry.
Me, I just said no.
Yes.
You see that one? We are not sleeping.
And my daughter found her way around it. She has quite a lot of friends, another one, and they keep doing sleepovers. So she would just tell me, she would have told them before she came to me that, okay, I can't do sleepovers, but I will we'll do the activity. What they do is they do some activities during the day, go shopping, go
Yeah,
to eat,
yeah,
then
yeah.
go for the
I even
supper.
sponsored that one.
So she will go for the,
Mm.
and then we'll pick her up in the night,
Mm.
and they just accepted her like that.
Mm.
And that is even strength of character in her.
Mm.
Whether it's necessary or
Daring
not to
to be
have that
different.
boundary, she's able to dare to be different and find a way around it, and they've accepted her for it.
Yes, yes.
But that's why I now
absolutely.
do not invite, because I know that if they can't invite, then it will be unfair.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
dated it.
Which brings me to that thing of also being able to stand on your own and be different.
Yes,
I keep repeating that children conform.
they do.
You know, they
do.
want to conform. But that thing of I don't, that breeding of an independent spirit,
Yes.
being able to stand, and yes, everybody is doing it.
Yes.
But I'm not persuaded, so I'm not going to do it.
Exactly.
I tell my child, you can say no.
You can
teach them to say no.
Yes.
You don't we are not nasty to anybody. We, as much as possible, we live in peace with everybody. But if you are not persuaded,
Yes,
don't do it. We know where we are coming from.
Exactly.
It does backfire a bit though,
because
they then do it to
yes,
me.
and that's what people say, that for your child to be able to stand on his own, your child should be able to disagree with you, and you should be able to handle it.
And it's so annoying.
It is.
I'll be like, let's go for, or I think you should go for. Nope, I don't want to go.
You're like,
and then you start doing. But why don't you look at it from this way? And you start
Whereas
debating.
when you were growing up, is do it. And
because I said so was
Exactly.
enough. But now we now negotiate. The other thing is, even when you're telling them, well, the Bible says this, and that's why we do this. My children will tell you really, but I don't think so, because. And so you're having to have these conversations with things about, like when we're having the talk about sexual purity, right? Yes, I brought scripture. Yeah, okay. Well, it was okay for them at that time. I said no. In fact, we are not sexually pure. It doesn't do anything for God. It's for you. Then I now went to, diseases, emotional, that kind of thing.
You have to try to sell it to them. All round.
That's the thing. It's a lot more work.
Yes.
But it's work that we have to do.
It is.
The other thing, so let's talk about here, even for me as an adult. Like where I work, I'm the only Black person on the team. And as I said, I arrived the UK full-grown, post-40, very confident consultant person. But sometimes I'm looking at this and I'm like, you feel different.
Yes.
Right? You feel different. Of course, there's all this talk about inclusion, but what I've learned to do is, well, okay, I mean, but where I'm coming from is a bit different.
Yes.
Here's what I'm used to.
Yes.
I'm sort of like in the HR coaching field. Well, here's what I'm used to, or what I've heard of. And then we all talk. So everybody knows that I may not necessarily get some jokes. One that really really does me in is how people would take pictures of, their dogs, their cats, and everybody is cooing as if they're children. I'm like, what's wrong with these people? So I'm now imagining our children. And there is racism. Let's just say it, right? There is racism, and our children, it's not overt. Luckily, my children are very confident, but how does one prepare them to stand out and hold their own?
Yeah. That's in fact, that's a big topic in itself, but many things. Just as you struggled, even I myself have had scenarios where I've had to be able to stand up and say, okay, oh, nice, but this is how we did it where we came from. I was talking about how, Christmas time, they were like, oh, I hadn't gotten something ready, and I was like, but that's not how we prepare for Christmas in where I come from. And I talked to them about how we prepare for Christmas, talked to them about what we cook, jollof rice. I don't do Brussels sprouts and stuff like that. And they learned, and we had a very lively conversation, but I held my own. So it didn't look like I was inadequate or I wasn't doing something right. So that's what I try to teach my children, because maybe they'd say, oh, something about EastEnders, and they hadn't watched it at that time or stuff like that. I had to tell them, look, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't grow up here, so there's no how you could have watched certain programs. You understand? Or been able to identify certain things, or, so just tell them, oh, I didn't grow up watching it. What is it about? And learn it and move on.
Yeah.
I think that another way to build their confidence is to teach them how to interact with everyone. So sometimes there's a tendency of, well, we're Nigerian. All your friends are Nigerian. All your diet is Nigerian. your church is nice, which I like being in a church, but you get what I mean. Like everywhere they interact is
It's
just
Nigeria.
their people, so they don't even develop skills. Do you understand? With the other people, if they're having play dates, go for the play dates. Interact with the parents in school. It just gives them a feeling of, oh yeah, I'm just another child. Do
Yeah.
you understand?
Yeah.
So build that up in them, and then also this is something that we need to learn, even myself, because there's so much negative news coming from home. You tend to find out that when you're discussing where you come from, it's just the negative.
Negativity. Yeah.
It's just, in fact, one day my son asked me and he whispered it. He said, Mommy, why are all, because we're watching some Nigerian movies where maybe they'll show from grace to grass, so they'll show one village scene, and why do, he asked. So I said, no. So I had to start showing him nice looking places. Rep your country. You understand? There are good aspects of it. When I'm with my colleagues at work, I say things like, oh, especially for those who try to make it look. I was on a plane one day going to Scotland. She was trying to say, oh, I worked in Nigeria. I know all about it. And she
No,
tried
you,
to.
you cannot.
I said exactly. I said
You
like
can't.
with everywhere there's the good, the bad, the ugly. Just
Mm.
like the government battles corruption even here. I say yes, there may be some of it there, but there's quite a lot too. I like I talked a lot about all the beautiful aspects of Nigeria, acknowledging the issues, but still talking about how good it was. So
Absolutely.
let them feel a sense of
Pride.
yes, in where they come from. As much as it's possible, it's not always easy. Let them go back home. Let them just be used to where they come from. One time, my family and I went to Dubai, and we heard, every time I saw a Caucasian looking person, I'd hear them speaking a language. So maybe they were from Germany or Paris or whatever. They were all speaking
Their own
languages. In fact, not
languages.
just Caucasian, plus everybody,
The Asians
were
too.
speaking their languages. And I was like, what? And I'm here, and you would now want to feel like if you don't speak English, you're not. No, English is not the be all and end all of everything. Be proud of it. We don't sing Yoruba songs, though, as in normally. Typically, my kids didn't grow up. On the bus, I taught them Labegi. That song, Labegi Orogo. We were singing it on the bus.
No, in fact,
we were singing it on
paying
the bus.
now. I'm paying for
Yes,
Yoruba lessons.
yes,
They will learn how to speak
I said
Yoruba.
have an identity, because here the truth is, no matter how long you stay, you will still have people asking.
You will
the
still be
question of,
other.
where are you originally? I don't take offense at that question, but many times that question doesn't always come from a good place too.
Yeah.
And it's also a fact. You are not from here. Even if you speak like you have your papers or whatever it is. So where are you originally from? Hold on to that. Be proud of it. So it's our job to feed them the good aspects. And then, of course, acknowledge what is not so good. But then also realize that even here, there are so many things that are not so good as well as the good ones.
Yeah.
So you have that balance in your mind and you don't feel inferior.
Yeah.
And just keep building your child, affirming them, affirmations and stuff like that to make them feel, comfortable. But it's important to also have a community of people who look like you. So that you never feel like after you've been here long, you won't always think, oh, I'm the only black. But there's still that tendency to come, or somebody will remind you.
Yeah.
So also have a strong church community, a strong, set of family friends where you have people you go,
belong,
you play.
you truly belong.
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to say that absolutely. That, and yes, your identity is where you come from, is also you are Christian.
Yes.
Dare to be boldly Christian.
Absolutely.
And have no apologies.
Yes.
For
I used to tell my children that if anybody can, and they do it, even young children can boldly say I'm an atheist.
Then
you should be able to
Christian,
say you're Christian.
and don't
no
back
apologies.
Down. Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody is saying their truth. That is your truth.
Yes.
That's the language of the age.
Yes.
Speak your truth. My truth is that I'm a Christian. I'm a child of the Most High God. Say it, don't be ashamed.
Yeah.
I really told them, especially the ones in secondary school, never ever.
Don't back down.
Yes.
Don't apologize.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to ride on the rules. That's how Paul succeeded. He knew what the rules were. He knew how you should treat a Roman citizen. That's how he got that far and was able to, bless so many people before, he finally saw Caesar. If you know that there is a freedom of speech, freedom of belief, you understand, in whatever it is, then you hold on to yours.
Yes.
And be proud
absolutely,
of it. Yes.
Absolutely. This has been a really stimulating conversation. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have found it, as educated, because I've learned quite a few things, and as enjoyable as we have. Thank you very much for joining us. We will come your way again in another week. if you have any questions, please, there will be an email address scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to email us, to drop it in the comments under the video on YouTube. And also, you can connect to us across all our social media channels. Until next time, thank you for joining us.
Take care. God
Bye.
bless.